The one thing truly confident people do differently. Machiavelli confidence is one of the most misunderstood forces in the world. We talk about it like it's a natural gift, something you either have or don't. We see it in athletes, leaders, influencers, their posture, their voice, their decisiveness. And we assume that what we're witnessing is strength. But Machiavelli, that razor-sharp observer of human nature, would tell you something different. He would say, what you think is confidence is often just performance. And what true confidence looks like, real, unshakable, inner power, is something far more rare, far more dangerous, and far more misunderstood. Because the one thing truly confident people do differently is something we almost never talk about. They embrace reality as it is, not as they wish it were. They refuse illusion, and they pay the price for that clarity. Let's begin with the illusion. Most people live in a curated world, not just online, but in their minds. We don't want to see ourselves as we are. We want to see ourselves as good, heroic, capable. We don't want to acknowledge the limits of our power, the fragility of our lives, the randomness of the world. So we build stories. We surround ourselves with affirmations, with people who agree with us, with distractions that numb us. We mistake loudness for certainty, bravado for strength. But Machiavelli, writing in an age of political chaos and betrayal, had no patience for comforting lies. He saw that the world is not fair, that people are not always good, that virtue alone does not protect you. And he argued, not cynically, but realistically, that the first step toward real power is to see the world without illusion. This is where truly confident people begin. Not with a delusional sense of superiority, but with a sobering look at the world. They ask, what is actually happening here? What are people motivated by? What are the rules beneath the rules? This takes courage. It's much easier to cling to the fantasy that if I'm nice, people will be fair. That if I work hard, success will come. That if I tell the truth, I will be rewarded. But Machiavelli said, no. The world doesn't operate on ideals. It operates on power, perception, fear, timing. And if you want to navigate it well, you must strip yourself of comforting assumptions. That's where confidence is born. From clarity. From knowing exactly what you're dealing with and still choosing to act. Still choosing to move forward, not because you've been promised success, but because you've accepted the risks. That's a different kind of confidence. It's not the confidence of the arrogant, and it's not the confidence of the naive. It's the confidence of the clear-eyed. The person who understands exactly how messy, unpredictable, and unfair the game is and plays anyway.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Machiavelli saw this quality in great leaders. He admired Caesar Borgia, not because Borgia was kind or noble, but because he was ruthless and intelligent. He saw reality. He knew when to use mercy and when to use fear. He didn't flinch when the situation demanded brutality. He didn't pretend the world was more moral than it is. And because of that, he wielded power with precision. Now, you might recoil at that example. But ask yourself, is it more dangerous to follow someone who sees the world clearly and acts strategically, or someone who believes their own lies and leads others into chaos because they're afraid to face the truth? This is where we need to be honest with ourselves. How often do we avoid reality in our own lives? How often do we tell ourselves stories to avoid discomfort? How often do we dress fear as optimism and call it hope? Machiavelli would challenge you to answer this. What illusions are you still clinging to, and what would happen if you let them go? That's the one thing truly confident people do differently. They look at the truth, even when it hurts. They don't need to be told they're right. They don't need applause. They don't need guarantees. They've trained themselves to see clearly, decide wisely, and act decisively. That kind of confidence can't be faked. And that's why it's so rare and so powerful. The hidden strength of disillusionment. Why seeing the world's darkness frees you. Disillusionment gets a bad reputation. We treat it like a failure of spirit, a kind of emotional collapse. When someone becomes disillusioned, we assume they've lost something: hope, faith, positivity. But Machiavelli would argue the opposite. He would say disillusionment is not the end of your strength, it's the beginning. Because only when you are disillusioned can you finally stop living in illusion. And for those who dare to go through that internal collapse, who let their idealism die and replace it with clarity, a new kind of power becomes available. It's not loud, and it doesn't look heroic, but it is steady. It is real. It is the power of someone who has nothing left to protect except truth itself. Let's look at what happens when we refuse to become disillusioned. We cling to fantasies. We believe that good always triumphs, that the world is fair, that hard work is always rewarded. These beliefs feel good, or they provide structure, but they set us up for psychological fragility. Because the moment reality breaks through, and it will, we shatter. We lose our footing. We feel betrayed. The world didn't break us, our illusions did. And this is what Machiavelli understood, that most people aren't afraid of evil, they're afraid of complexity. They're afraid that the world isn't black and white, and that morality alone doesn't guarantee safety. Now think about the leaders, influencers, even friends that you admire. Ask yourself honestly, do you admire them because they're kind? Or because they're clear? Do you trust them because they always say the right thing? Or because they know how to navigate the gray areas without losing their center? That's a much harder skill. Anyone can repeat platitudes. Anyone can say, be nice. But how many people can face betrayal, loss, injustice, and still act with purpose? Still lead? Still think clearly without being consumed by bitterness or delusion? That's what disillusionment gives you. When you've accepted that people lie, that systems fail, that fairness isn't guaranteed, you stop waiting for the world to be perfect. You stop needing everything to make sense. And that's when you start making real decisions, not idealistic ones, not reactive ones, but strategic ones. Because you're no longer operating from fantasy. You're operating from reality. Machiavelli wanted leaders to be disillusioned, but he saw it not as corruption, but as a necessary awakening. In his view, the prince who believes everyone is good will be destroyed by those who are not. But the prince who understands human nature, its vanity, its fear, its ambition, can govern wisely, not with cruelty for its own sake, but with precision, with balance, with strength that is neither naive nor tyrannical. We can apply this exact principle to our personal lives. If you believe everyone will treat you fairly because you're kind, you will live in constant disappointment. But if you understand that people are often driven by self-interest, fear, or ego, you're not shocked when they let you down. You're prepared. You can love them anyway, but from a place of wisdom, not fantasy. That's what separates the truly confident from the emotionally dependent. They don't need the world to be perfect in order to function. They have already accepted that it isn't. And here's the paradox: the more you accept the darkness, the freer you become. Because you stop trying to control everything. You stop needing people to behave a certain way. You stop demanding that life meet your expectations. You move from a reactive state to a strategic one. You become grounded, calm, and ironically more optimistic. Not the naive optimism that expects good things to happen just because, but the earned optimism that comes from knowing you can handle whatever happens. Disillusionment, then, is not the death of hope. It's the death of fantasy. And from that death, true strength is born. The kind of strength that doesn't crumble under pressure. The kind that doesn't panic when things go sideways. The kind of strength that sees clearly, acts wisely, and leads others not by pretending to know everything, but by being unshakably grounded in reality. So ask yourself, what illusions are you still holding on to? What comforting lies are you still telling yourself about people, about success, about life? And more importantly, what would your life look like if you let those illusions go? Would you be weaker, or would you finally be free? That's the Machiavellian twist most people miss. He wasn't saying to become cruel. He was saying to become clear, to let go of the need for the world to be fair, and instead become the kind of person who can thrive in an unfair world without losing their soul. The confident person doesn't avoid disillusionment. They welcome it. They know that only by facing the darkness can they stop being controlled by it. And that's the hidden strength most never discover. Strategic kindness. How truly confident people balance compassion and power. We often treat kindness and power as if they're opposites. In popular culture, kindness is soft, sensitive, vulnerable, while power is hard, commanding, even ruthless. But this dichotomy is built on a misunderstanding of both. Truly confident people, the ones who've grounded themselves in reality and shed their illusions, know that kindness is not weakness. In fact, when it's rooted in strength and clarity, kindness becomes one of the most powerful tools in the world. Machiavelli understood this better than we give him credit for. While he's often quoted for saying that it's better to be feared than loved, what he actually taught, if you read him carefully, is that the ideal leader understands when and how to be both. Let's think about what real kindness is. It's not pleasing everyone. It's not avoiding conflict. It's not saying yes to avoid discomfort. That's fear wearing a mask. That's the kindness of someone who hasn't yet developed the strength to stand alone. True kindness is something else entirely. It's deliberate. It's controlled. It's given freely, not out of fear, but out of abundance, out of wisdom. When you're truly confident, you don't need to dominate others to feel powerful. You don't need to win every interaction. You're not constantly protecting your ego. And because of that, you can afford to be kind. But this kindness is strategic, not manipulative, but intentional. It asks, what does this situation require? Does it require firmness or gentleness? Does it call for compassion or confrontation? A truly confident person doesn't default to one or the other. They assess, they adapt, they move from a place of strength, not insecurity, because they no longer operate from ego. They're not trying to prove themselves. They know who they are. Machiavelli warned against being consistently generous or merciful, not because those traits are bad in themselves, but because if you apply them blindly, then you become predictable, and vulnerable. If you're always kind, people will exploit that. If you're always harsh, people will fear you but never trust you. The wise leader, the confident person, moves between these poles with precision. They understand that real power lies in timing, in knowing when to be kind, not just how to be kind. Think about someone in your life who is truly confident, not the loudest or most dominant, but the one who stays calm under pressure, who listens before they speak, who doesn't need to assert dominance to feel secure. That person likely shows kindness in a way that feels grounded. You trust it because it doesn't feel performative. It feels like a choice, and that's what makes it powerful. Because when kindness feels like a choice rather than a compulsion, it carries weight. It influences people. It opens doors. It earns loyalty. Now contrast that with fake kindness, the kind that comes from fear, from the desire to be liked, from the need for approval. It may feel nice at first, but it quickly becomes hollow. People sense that it's not real strength behind it. And when pressure hits, that kindness vanishes. It's not sustainable. Because it wasn't anchored in truth, it was built on the need to avoid discomfort. Strategic kindness, on the other hand, is sustainable because it's chosen. It's not afraid of being misunderstood. It can coexist with boundaries, with tough decisions, with uncomfortable truths. It's not interested in pleasing everyone, it's interested in doing what's right, even when that means being firm. And this is where Machiavellian wisdom meets modern emotional intelligence. Confidence is not about being cold. It's about being deliberate. It's about knowing that kindness is most effective when it's paired with strength. So the question we have to ask ourselves is this: is our kindness coming from clarity or from fear? Are we kind because we choose to be, or because we're afraid of what will happen if we're not liked? Are we giving our energy because we want to, or because we don't know how to say no? This is the mirror truly confident people have looked into. They've examined their motives. They've stripped away the false humility and the ego-driven generosity. What remains is something far stronger, a kindness that is not dependent on circumstances, but a kindness that can stand alone. A kindness that serves a purpose and never compromises the truth. That is the balance Machiavelli pointed toward. Not cruelty or softness, but calculated virtue. Not performative kindness, but strategic compassion. And once you master that balance, you stop being reactive. You stop being manipulated by the opinions of others. You don't need to prove anything. You simply act wisely and decisively. Because when kindness comes from power, it changes everything. Mastery of the inner arena, why true confidence begins with conquering yourself. There's one final truth that separates the truly confident from those merely pretending, and they've mastered the inner arena long before they try to conquer the outer world. This is the real battlefield, the one most people never even acknowledge. While others are obsessed with appearances, status, wealth, applause, the truly confident are engaged in something far more difficult: self-mastery. And Machiavelli, often misread as a prophet of manipulation, understood this better than most. He knew that the greatest threat to any leader wasn't an enemy or a rival, it was himself. His ego, his fear, his impulse to believe his own illusions. To lead others, you must first lead yourself. That sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things in the world. Because it requires you to confront the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid. Your insecurities, your contradictions, your self-deceptions. As most people run from this. They distract themselves with ambition, with conflict, with attention. They think confidence means being above doubt. But real confidence comes from going through doubt, not avoiding it. It comes from questioning your own motives, challenging your assumptions, and learning to sit with discomfort without flinching. Think of the person who reacts to every criticism with defensiveness, who needs to win every argument, who dominates every room just to feel important. That isn't confidence, it's insecurity in disguise. It's the performance of strength, not the reality of it. Now think of the person who can stay silent when others shout, who can admit when they're wrong without losing their sense of self, who doesn't need to be praised to know their worth. That's inner mastery. That's what Machiavelli would recognize as real power, because it cannot be taken away by external forces. This is why the truly confident don't rush. They don't chase. They don't panic. They've already learned that control over others is meaningless if you haven't first gained control over yourself. They've faced their envy, their pride, their fear of failure, and they've made peace with it. This doesn't mean they're perfect. It means they're aware. And awareness is the foundation of all enduring confidence. Because once you know your own mind, your own weaknesses, your own patterns, you become unshakable, not because you're invincible, but because you're honest. Machiavelli's advice to princes wasn't just tactical, it was psychological. He was telling us, if you don't understand human nature, including your own, you'll be destroyed by it. And that applies to all of us. Because the outer world is chaotic, unpredictable. You can't control what people will do, but you can control whether you react or respond, whether you lash out or lead, whether you collapse under pressure or rise through it. So ask yourself, what parts of yourself are you still afraid to confront? What inner battles are you avoiding by focusing on external ones? And what would change if you stopped trying to conquer the world and started by mastering your own impulses? Truly confident people aren't superhuman, but they're just brutally honest with themselves. They've done the hard inner work, and that's why they can walk into chaos with calm. That's why they can be kind without being weak and strong without being cruel. They've earned their confidence not through performance, but through presence and through mastery. And that more than charisma, more than charm, more than power is what makes them different. Because in the end, the one thing truly confident people do differently is this: they rule themselves before they ever try to rule anything else.